The breaking point. The enormous chamber of the galactic hegemony gleamed with artificial starlight that reflected off polished stone and metal surfaces. Representatives from over 300 species filled the tiered seating, their murmurs creating a constant background hum. At the center, elevated above all others, sat the High Council, 7 species who had ruled galactic affairs for millennia. Commander Elena Reyes adjusted the collar of her dress uniform as she strode through the main entrance. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her expression remained carefully neutral despite the tension evident in her posture. Behind her followed a small delegation of humans, looking plain compared to the elaborate ceremonial dress of other species. "The human representatives are recognized," announced Arbiter Thax, the Valkyran chairperson. His gray-scaled skin rippled with phosphorescent patterns, a biological display of his species' dominance. Elena nodded formally while taking her position at the speaking platform. For 15 years, she had represented humanity at these sessions. For 15 years, she had watched as human petitions were systematically denied, while species who joined the hegemony centuries after Earth were granted greater rights, resources, and territories. We will now hear the Council's decision regarding Earth's petition for expanded settlement rights and equal trade access. Thax continued, not bothering to mask the dismissive tone in his voice. Elena already knew the answer. The encrypted message she'd received from Earth Command that morning had prepared her for this moment. She glanced down at her data tablet where a simple authorization code glowed. Threshold crossed. "The petition is denied," Thax announced. Furthermore, the Council has determined that human expansion in the Orion sector must be halted immediately. All colonies established in the past 20 cycles must be abandoned within 1 standard year. A murmur spread through the chamber. Even for the notoriously restrictive hegemony, this was harsh. The Orion sector contains 7 human colonies with millions of inhabitants. Does the human delegation wish to respond? Thax asked with practiced political courtesy. Elena stepped forward. "We do." Her voice carried clearly through the chamber, the acoustics perfectly engineered to project even a whisper. For 123 years, humanity has participated in this hegemony. For 123 years, we have followed your restrictive regulations. We have watched as species who joined after us were granted rights we were denied. We have witnessed how our petitions were systematically rejected while our resources were coveted. The Meraki representative, a tall, insectoid being, clicked angrily. "The human speaks out of turn. This is not the proper procedure for addressing a council decree." Elena ignored the interruption. Humanity no longer recognizes the authority of this hegemony. Effective immediately, Earth and all human colonies withdraw from all hegemony agreements, treaties, and negotiations. The chamber erupted in chaos. Several representatives shot to their feet, shouting in various languages. Thax slammed his ceremonial staff repeatedly, trying to restore order. "This is unprecedented," hissed the Drovian representative, her tentacles writhing in agitation. "No species has ever withdrawn." Elena waited for the noise to subside slightly before continuing. "We came to you as equals. You treated us as subjects. That ends today. You cannot survive without hegemony protection," Thax snarled, his phosphorescence flaring with anger. "The trade routes, the defense packs, you would be vulnerable to any aggressor." Elena smiled for the first time. "We've prepared for this day for a long time. Humanity thanks you for your hospitality, but we will find our own path forward." She turned and walked back to the human delegation, who were already gathering their belongings. Commander Reyes called out Selra, the Latarian representative, one of the few who had occasionally supported human petitions. "Reconsider this rash action. The consequences." "The consequences," Elena interrupted, pausing at the chamber door, "are yours to bear, not ours." As the human delegation exited the council chamber, the shouting behind them grew louder. The last sound Elena heard before the massive doors closed was Thax's ceremonial staff breaking as he slammed it in fury. Humanity had just changed the galaxy forever. The news of humanity's withdrawal spread across the galaxy faster than any diplomatic announcement in recent memory. Within hours, every major world received the broadcast of Rise walking out of the hegemony chamber. On the human flagship Defiance, Admiral John watched the reactions unfold on multiple screens. The Admiral was a sturdy man with close-cropped hair and eyes that had seen too many conflicts. "The Valkyrian networks are calling it a human temper tantrum," reported his communications officer. "They're predicting we'll come crawling back within a month." John nodded. "And the Meraki?" "Much more concerned. Their military vessels have begun movement near our border colonies." "Just as we expected," John said. He turned to his tactical display where hundreds of human ships were shown in strategic positions. Most of the galaxy thought Earth had only a modest defense fleet. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "All ships are at standby," Admiral, his second-in-command, reported. "The stealth units are in position near all major hegemony worlds." "Good. Remember, defensive posture only. We don't start anything." Back on Earth, Commander Reyes stood before the Global Council in the rebuilt United Nations headquarters in Geneva. Unlike the ornate hegemony chamber, this room was simple and practical, much like humanity itself. The initial phase went exactly as predicted. Reyes explained to the gathered leaders. "The hegemony believes our withdrawal is an emotional response, not a strategic one." The Secretary General nodded. "And the military situation?" Admiral Zhang reports the Meraki are already positioning for possible conflict. The Valkyrians are still in denial. Reyes paused. "More importantly, we've received private communications from 11 smaller species who want to discuss alternatives to hegemony membership." This caused murmurs around the table. One of the council members, Director Ishikawa, looked concerned. "Are we ready for this? The hegemony has controlled interstellar trade for thousands of years. Our economy will adjust," Reyes responded confidently. "We've been preparing supply chains and alternative markets for decades. There will be shortages of some luxury goods, but nothing essential." The Secretary General stood and walked to the window overlooking the rebuilt city. "For generations, humanity has been treated as second-class citizens in a galaxy we helped protect. We've contributed technologies, resources, and even fought in their wars, and still they deny us equal status." She turned back to face the council. "No more. We may face difficult times ahead, but we will face them as a free species." In the private chambers of the Valkyrian High Command, First Strategist Krex slammed his fist on the table. "This is not a simple diplomatic incident. The humans were planning this. Our intelligence shows they've been stockpiling resources and repositioning assets for years." The Valkyrian Prime Minister dismissed his concerns with a wave. "Humans are emotional creatures. They will suffer without hegemony protection and trade. Give them time to realize their mistake." "And if they don't?" asked the junior minister. Before anyone could answer, an aide rushed into the room. "Urgent news. The Letarians have announced they're reviewing their hegemony membership. They cite troubling treatment of emerging species as their reason." Silence fell over the room as the implications became clear. The Letarians were a respected mid-tier species. If they were questioning the hegemony now, "Contact our agents within human territories," the Prime Minister ordered. "Find their weaknesses. The hegemony has stood for 15,000 years. We will not let one upstart species threaten that." On the edge of human space, a small Meraki scout ship approached a human mining colony. The captain expected minimal defenses, perhaps a few outdated patrol vessels. Instead, his sensors detected an advanced defense grid and 7 military vessels that hadn't been there a week earlier. "Send word to High Command," the captain ordered. The humans were ready for this. They'd been hiding their true strength. As he turned his ship away, the captain wondered what else the humans might be hiding. The first cracks in the galactic hegemony had begun to show, and they were spreading faster than anyone expected. The unraveling. 3 months after humanity's departure, The galactic hegemony chamber had transformed. Where once there had been order and ceremony, now there was heated debate and barely concealed hostility. The ornate chamber that had witnessed thousands of years of galactic politics was dividing into clear factions. On one side sat the hardliners, led by the Valkyrans, who demanded immediate sanctions against humanity. Opposite them were the pragmatists, mostly mid-tier species who urged caution and diplomacy. The tension was palpable. The humans must be punished for their disrespect. Velud Thax, the Valkyran chairperson. I propose a complete blockade of all human worlds until they return to hegemony authority. The Mereki representative clicked his mandibles in agreement. We have already positioned our fleets. We can begin immediately. From the other side of the chamber, the Latarian representative stood. Perhaps we should consider why the humans left, Selra suggested. Many of their complaints have merit. The hegemony has consistently. An explosion cut off her words. The chamber shook, and alarms blared throughout the building. Security officers rushed in, surrounding the representatives. The Valkyran ambassador has been assassinated, announced the chief of security. The explosive device was in his private chambers. Chaos erupted. Accusations flew across the chamber. This is human retaliation, shouted the Meraki representative. Meanwhile, on the human diplomatic vessel Unity, Commander Reyes received the news with shock. This is very bad timing, she told her staff. The hardliners will blame us immediately. Her intelligence officer looked worried. We had nothing to do with this. Should we issue a denial? Reyes shook her head. They won't believe simple denials. We need evidence. She turned to her security chief. Contact Admiral Zhang. We need to find out who really did this, and fast. Within hours, human intelligence networks, which had secretly been far more extensive than the hegemony ever realized, were activated across the galaxy. 3 days later, Reyes stood before a hastily arranged meeting of neutral species on the independent trade world of Nexus. Representatives from 22 species had agreed to hear her out. We had nothing to do with the assassination, Reyes stated firmly. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. This is security footage from a hegemony station's main docking bay, taken 6 hours before the explosion. The footage showed a Drovian maintenance worker accessing a service panel near the Valkyran ambassador's quarters. The assassin was Drovian, working under orders from their high command. Reyes continued. The Valkyrans and Drovians have been allies for centuries, but the Drovians have grown tired of Valkyran dominance. They saw humanity's departure as an opportunity to eliminate their competition for power. Murmurs spread through the gathered representatives. How did you obtain this footage? Asked the Firian representative, a small crystalline being. Hegemony security is supposed to be impenetrable. Reyes smiled slightly. Let's just say humanity has had contingency plans for some time. We expected something like this might happen, though perhaps not quite so soon. Why show us this? Asked another representative. Why not present it to the hegemony? Would they listen? Reyes replied. Besides, we no longer recognize hegemony authority. But we wanted you all to know the truth. In the coming months, the hegemony will likely continue to blame humanity for their problems. Remember that not everything is as it seems. As the meeting concluded, 5 of the representatives approached Reyes privately. Our worlds are considering following Earth's example, the Latarian representative said quietly. The hegemony has treated us unfairly for too long. We would like to discuss alternatives. Reyes nodded. Earth welcomes such discussions. That same day, human trading ships appeared in systems where they had previously been restricted. These weren't military vessels, but ordinary merchant ships carrying goods that many worlds had grown dependent upon. On the frontier world of Kellis, a human trading vessel docked despite hegemony restrictions. The local governor, facing shortages of crucial medical supplies, had secretly authorized the landing. The hegemony tells us to boycott human goods, the governor told his staff, but they offer no alternatives. My people need these medicines. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The elaborate trade network that the hegemony had controlled for millennia was beginning to unravel, one planet at a time. 1 month later, the first shots of open conflict were fired. It happened not between humans and hegemony forces, but between the Valkyrans and Drovians over the resource-rich Eridani system. For centuries, both species had claimed the system, but hegemony regulations had kept the peace. Now those regulations meant nothing. Across the galaxy, communication networks lit up with news of the battle. 3 Valkyran cruisers destroyed, 5 Drovian vessels damaged, a mining colony caught in the crossfire with hundreds dead. Admiral John watched the reports from the bridge of the Defiance. "Just as we predicted," he said quietly. "The old rivalries are resurfacing." His tactical officer nodded. The hegemony's control was always artificial. Remove it, and the natural order returns. "Position our observation vessels near the conflict zone," John ordered. "I want to know exactly what weapons they're using against each other." On Nexus, Commander Reyes stood before a much larger gathering than before. Representatives from 47 species filled the conference hall, many from worlds that had been hegemony members for centuries. "Today marks a significant moment," Reyes said. "The Eridani conflict demonstrates what many of us have long known. The hegemony's peace was built on favoritism and oppression, not justice and equality." She gestured, and a holographic display showed the galaxy map. Small red dots appeared across it. "These are the conflicts that have erupted in just 4 months since humanity's withdrawal. Not because we left, but because the hegemony's artificial control is slipping." The Latarian representative stood. 3 days ago, my world formally withdrew from the hegemony. Today, I am authorized to announce that we join with humanity in forming a new alliance, one based on equal representation and mutual respect. A murmur ran through the room. The Latarians were the 6th species to officially leave the hegemony, but they were by far the most influential one. One by one, other representatives stood to announce their intentions. By the end of the meeting, 28 species had committed to joining what Reyes called the Stellar Accord. "This is unacceptable." The Valkyran Prime Minister slammed his fist on the conference table. "The humans have formed their own coalition. They're stealing our member worlds." The hegemony's emergency session had been in progress for hours. The once mighty council chamber now held representatives from fewer than 200 species, down from the original 300. "We must take decisive action," the Meraki representative said, their previous conflict with the Valkyrans temporarily set aside in the face of a greater threat. "I propose a full military blockade of all human worlds and their new allies." The vote was swift and nearly unanimous. Within hours, hegemony warships were dispatched to form blockades around key human planets. The hegemony fleet arrived at the human colony of New Eden, expecting to establish an easy blockade. What they found instead shocked them. "Sir, I'm detecting multiple defense platforms," reported the Valkyran captain's sensor officer. "They appear to be, sir, they're far more advanced than anything in our database." Before the captain could respond, his communications officer interrupted. "Incoming transmission from the planet." "Sir." The view screen showed a human officer, calm and professional. "Hegemony vessels, you have entered the sovereign space of a human world. We are not hostile, but we will defend ourselves if necessary. Please withdraw to the system's edge." The Valkyran captain sneered. "We are establishing the hegemony-mandated blockade. Your primitive defenses cannot stop us." The human officer simply nodded. "We hoped for a peaceful resolution. Please note that we will take only defensive actions." As the transmission ended, the Valkyran captain ordered his fleet forward. The first ships had barely moved when the defense platforms activated. Not a single shot was fired. Instead, a wave of energy spread from the platforms, washing over the hegemony ships. Suddenly, every engine in the fleet went dead. "What happened?" demanded the captain. "Restore power immediately." "Sir, all systems are offline," his engineer reported in panic. The humans used some kind of targeted electromagnetic pulse. It shut down everything except life support. Minutes later, small human vessels approached, attaching tow cables to the disabled hegemony ships. The communication system flickered back to life, and the same human officer appeared. Your vessels will be towed to the system's edge, and basic power will be restored. Please inform the hegemony that while we respect your right to exist, we will not tolerate aggression. Similar scenes played out at every attempted blockade. Not a single human was killed, not a single hegemony ship destroyed. Yet the hegemony's military action had failed completely. The balance of power had shifted. 6 months after humanity's departure, the galactic hegemony faced its darkest day. The grand chamber that had once housed representatives from 300 species now held barely 70. The gleaming pillars and ornate decorations couldn't hide the emptiness of the room. The Valkyrian chairperson stood at the center, his once proud posture now stooped with worry. "We must face reality," he announced, his voice echoing in the half-empty chamber. "The hegemony's authority has been severely compromised." No one spoke. The remaining representatives looked at each other nervously. "Our economic projections show a 70% decline in hegemony-regulated trade," continued the chairperson. "Our military readiness is at its lowest point in 5,000 years, and as of yesterday, the Firians have officially withdrawn to join the Stellar Accord." This news sent a shock through the chamber. The Firians were one of the founding species of the hegemony, present since its creation 15 millennia ago. "If the Firians have left," whispered one representative to another, "there's nothing left to save." As if to punctuate this sentiment, a messenger rushed in. "Bypassing security. The central treasury has been emptied. The financial ministers have flooded with the reserve funds." Chaos erupted. Representatives shouted accusations across the chamber. Some rushed to communication devices to contact their homeworlds. Others simply sat in stunned silence. Through it all, the Valkyrian chairperson stood frozen, watching as 15,000 years of galactic order collapsed around him. 1 year after humanity's withdrawal, the galaxy had transformed in ways few could have imagined. The Grand Hegemony Chamber now hosted a very different gathering. The ornate high table that had seated the 7 dominant species was gone. In its place stood a simple circular arrangement of equal seats, with no position more prominent than any other. Commander, now Ambassador, Elena Rice stood at the center, addressing representatives from over 200 worlds. 1 year ago, humanity chose independence over subservience. We did not know then how many others felt as we did. We did not leave to destroy the hegemony, but to forge our own path. She gestured to the representatives seated in the circle. What has emerged is something better, a true alliance of equals. The Stellar Accord does not demand obedience. It invites cooperation. It does not hoard knowledge. It shares it. It does not rule through fear, but through mutual respect. The Letarian representative, Selra, stood. When humanity walked out, they showed us all what was possible. The hegemony did not crumble because humans left. It crumbled because its foundation was rotten. The Accord builds on stronger principles: equality, respect, and true cooperation. Across the galaxy, a new era had begun. The power vacuum left by humanity's departure had been filled not by chaos, but by something entirely new. A galactic community where no single species dominated, where technological advancement was encouraged rather than controlled, and where even the smallest voice could be heard. The day humanity walked out, they did more than free themselves. They freed the galaxy.